Nearshoring is the new hot word going on right now all over the internet because everybody's thinking of new options in order to avoid crossing ponds. So, in this video, I'm going to tell you all about the International Services Law, which pretty much dictates the best advantages to nearshoring in El Salvador. Here we go. First of all, who am I? Hello, I am Jeni Ari, La Gringa Salvadoreña, and I have over 300 videos on YouTube all about expat life in El Salvador. And I've lived in El Salvador for over 4 years. I'm married to a Salvadoran, and the company I work for is called Living Like a Local, where we help foreigners investigate, immigrate, invest, and even integrate into Salvadoran society, because it's the internet and there's lots of hype out there, and we want to make sure you know exactly what you're getting into when you come to El Salvador, and it's a win-win for both El Salvador and for you. So you may have heard that President Bukele has the kind of the goal of making El Salvador the Singapore of the West. And in order to do that, he's created these laws that create a tax haven for certain companies. And as you've seen around the world, when you have a really tiny country that maybe can't have a whole lot of exports, you kind of go into the highly skilled labor fields in order to make your company shine on the international stage. In fact, I just had a client come down from Canada who's looking into moving his aviation business down here. And I'm going to share with you the PowerPoint that we got from the Ministerio de Economía, or the Minister of Economy, of the International Services Law. And it's a little specific as far as it applies to his industry, but I'll try and put in as much other information that might apply to your industry during the PowerPoint. Okay, so all about the El Salvador International Services Law, and a few little things that I'm going to give as a few details that weren't necessarily part of this presentation, but I think that are very important that you know, is that all those who benefit from this law are those industrial infrastructure type developers, those who use the infrastructure to develop their own businesses, and those who are service centers. For example, I'll give you a little example of Air City. Air City is a free zona franca, or free trade zone, that is directly right beside the main airport in El Salvador. They are a service park developer, and they're like the largest industrial park developer in El Salvador. And so they have Air City Zone, and then they have service park direct users, or different companies that come in and contract with them, and then they build what those companies need, and then the companies rent out that space from Aristos, for example. But let's say, okay, you're not going with a service park developer, you want to do your own thing, you want to kind of have more control, you want to own it yourself, so that then you would be a service center. For example, the company that is coming down that we are doing investigation research for, they don't necessarily want to be part of a service park per se. They just want to do their own thing, have their own space. They want to build it themselves, and we're helping them find all the right contacts and get through all the right process in order to do that for themselves. They will be a service center because the service that they are doing is not going to be directly sold in El Salvador, because that's kind of what these zonas francas, or these foreign free trade zones, are all about. It's not, what they're doing is they're bringing in raw materials, or they're bringing in different services for clients outside of El Salvador. They're not serving people directly in El Salvador. And that's kind of the key, because that's where tariffs would apply if these products or these services were actually for Salvadorans. But they're not. And so that's why the tariffs don't apply, and that's why they have this special law, because it's just bringing jobs. It's not necessarily, there's no Salvadoran products to necessarily protect. So on that same note, to be a beneficiary of the law, you must first have to register the capital according to the investment law in the National Investment Office in El Salvador. And that's because we're not Dubai, okay? Like, we do have money laundering laws. We do need to make sure that the money is coming in. It's coming in from legitimate sources. And all employees, of course, are subject to Salvadoran labor laws. Now, the activities that are going to be carried out here are international distribution, which is like storage, collection, consolidation, and deconsolidation of third-party goods by a beneficiary of law. Also, international logistics operations, which are those that facilitate the distribution and processes of goods. Call centers. There's already a lot of call centers, but call centers for those companies who are offering information services such as receiving orders, handling complaints, reservations, telemarketing, sale of products. There is a lot of call centers already here, whether it be, credit card companies, whether it be banking companies, whether it be, Amazon call centers for any different type of on the web business. Next is information technologies, which are those companies that provide services to companies that are outside of Salvadoran territory, both in design, development, support, maintenance, or administration of software, database, platforms, systems, applications, all kinds of tools, video games, cloud storage service, AI, crypto companies, all those types of, you're needing highly skilled workers that can work in tech. Also repair of that tech equipment, and of course BPOs, business processes. This is like Google just moved in. They have a big beautiful building in San Salvador, and it's their center of their Latin American operations is right there in downtown San Sal. So they would apply under kind of like the business processes type. Also, the investigation and development, that goes down underneath like research and development companies, which are those companies that kind of provide an experimental, scientific, or tech research and development service in the areas of chemistry, biology, medical sciences, agricultural sciences, and others that are intended for the improvement of products and production processes. Not necessarily producing them here, but just researching and doing and improving your processes. Next, down here, there's maritime vessel maintenance and repair companies, which provide their services to the international maritime transport. Also, aircraft repair and maintenance companies. And of course, this is what applied to my client and what attracted them here. But it's both in the repair of components and accessories, advisory services, training, technical personnel. These do not include the maintenance carried out in like passenger terminals, when your plane is delayed and they have to switch out a part or they have to tweak something. Unless that activity is complementary to the main activity of maintenance and repair of the aircraft. There's medical and hospital service companies that provide their services to people that have a permanent residence outside of Salvadoran territory. In other words, like WebMD type places, or say you have a hospital and they have like a little nurse call center, but again, it's not necessarily direct consultation services. Maybe it's something about referrals or setting an appointment. International financial services are the companies that provide support to business processes and companies. Something else that's maybe a little bit different that you may not have thought of is container repair and maintenance, which are those companies that are responsible for repairing or maintaining dry refrigerated containers, all special equipment. This service must be intended for companies dedicated to the international transport of goods. So really making El Salvador a logistics hub, a tech hub and a call center hub. Let's see. There's also care for the elderly and the convalescents. Now, this, you might think, oh, it's nursing homes, right? No, not necessarily. Again, this is not for services to Salvadoran citizens. This is services are provided for people, again, that are abroad who need special care services. Very similar to like, what is it? That thing that my grandma had where she had she wore this little device around her neck just in case she fell and broke her hip. She could push the button, and I think it was called Life Alert. That type of a elderly convalescent care kind of service. Let's see. Next, cinematography companies. Now, in this, they're talking about companies that are carrying out post-production of a recorded material, like subtitles, translation, editing, those kind of things. Specialized services for aircraft, those that provide services like international passenger cargo flights for supplies of beverages, prepared food, as well as inventory management, organization, laundry, and cleaning of the aircraft. It's really important, and and of course, since the company my client was bringing down was focused in on this, that's where we got a little bit deeper information as it applies to them and their company. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the labor law in El Salvador establishes a minimum of 90% of the workers are Salvadoran and only 10% are non-national or foreign workers. However, this law gives the option, I think it's under Article 47 in the law, says that there is an option requesting a special leave when the employees are not properly qualified yet. So it's necessary to kind of cover the positions for a period of time, of training time, you could say, within 5 years of coming down here to El Salvador, in which future Salvadoran employees must be trained and technified, so that after those 5 years, the percentage of that law establishes the 90-10 ratio. And for example, that applied to our company, because they're like, well, we're going to come down, but we've got a whole lot of training that we need to do for the employees that we're going to employ down here in El Salvador. And at first it's like, well, wait a minute, we're not going to meet that 90-10 ratio, especially in the first year or even 2 years while all that training is happening. But as long as we request and put in that request for that special permission during that time, and we tell them this is what we're doing, and we're to that 90-10 ratio by the time we are 5 years incorporated in El Salvador, it's all good. So let's say, and there's other requirements, as you can see here. Of course, you've got to make sure you've got the right permits. If you are doing a service center yourself, then you've got to apply for all the right permits yourself. If you're working through a service park provider like Air City, they're going to handle all the permits. You don't have to worry about that stuff. You just have to work on your contract through them. The facilities, of course, also must comply with the environmental, occupational health, and safety conditions. Again, if you're going through a service park, they will provide and detail all of those out. You, of course, have to have a formal administrative and financial organization. In other words, you have to register your business in El Salvador. And as I mentioned before, you have to do the investment registration, so we know that the money is not coming from sketchy sources. So, why is this a good thing? How does this benefit you and your company? Well, when it comes down to it, massive tax exemptions. So for the income, for example, income tax exemption. For the income from the incentivized activities and the profits or dividends for shareholders during the period that they carry out their operations. And there are limitations to this, like I think it's depending upon the industry, it goes up to like 15 years that these exemptions come into place. But again, there's a lot more detail because depending upon the type of industry, there are some like bare minimum factors. And that applies to whether you're going through a service park or whether you're going to be your own service center. For example, some of the requirements, or here's one example. For example, companies that provide specialized services for aircraft, since we were doing all that research, they have to meet the requirement that their investment begins with a minimum amount of $500,000 in the first year of operations, and both in fixed assets and in working capital, with operating with a number of not less than, that they're going to have at least 50 permanent jobs. And of course, they have to present a business plan. And again, even with the service parks, they're going to have their minimums as far as how much square footage you need to be in there. You can't just say, hey, well, I want to be in your service park and all I just need is this tiny little building and I'm only going to employ maybe 3 Salvadorans or something along that lines. Or it's going to be all Salvadorans, but it's only 3 employees. That might not qualify for what they need, what their projections are for their service park per se. So, of course, you have to do deeper research on that, and our legal team can dig in with you about your specific industry and your specific company. But anyway, back to the other incentives though, is 1, no income tax, 2, municipal tax exemption. Now, property taxes, there are no property taxes in El Salvador, but there are city municipal taxes. But on the assets of the company during the period that you're carrying out your operations, the period that is outlined in the law according to your industry, you will have no municipal taxes. And the other big one, the one that kind of eliminates a lot possible other nearshoring businesses, is you have total exemption of the customs duties and other taxes levied on importation. Now, importation taxes are usually the killer, or it's either the all go or no go when it comes to importation taxes. And this applies to all the machinery, equipment, tools, spare parts, accessories, office furniture, equipment, on any other goods that are necessary for the execution of your activity. That is very important. For example, some of our clients that we help move their families in, or they're retirees and they're moving into El Salvador. I mean, we tell them straight up, look, do not bring your car. It's not worth it to bring your car. Sell your car there and buy a car here. Unless you're Salvadoran and you can bring your car because it's part of that tax exemption that President Bukele allows for diaspora that are coming back. Because the import fees to bring a car into El Salvador, it's something like up to 40%. So if you've got, and it can only be within 8 years old. So if you've got, a car that's 4 years old, that's probably worth 25,000, and then you've got 40% taxes, import taxes on top of that, slap on another 12,000 or something, 10,000 on top of that 25. So you're paying $10,000 in taxes just to bring your car in. It's like, honey, sell your car there, buy a car here, and skip the 10,000 importation fees. So again, that's why this is such a beautiful tax haven option. If you have one of those industries, because having no taxes to pay, and once you get established and once you get rolling, it's awesome. It's awesome. It really makes it the greatest place to make business happen in the Western Hemisphere. Now, if you have a company that does not necessarily apply under this law, let's say coconut oil. Now that everybody knows that seed oils are bad, and if they're trying to, take out the canola oils and the seed oil and the corn oils and peanut oils and things like that. So coconut oil, avocado oil, whoop, that demand is going to go up through the roof with olive oil because those are the good oils now. And if tariffs create a big problem for because most of the coconut oil comes from the Philippines or from Malaysia. Well, hello, you want to get it closer to home, you could do a coconut oil factory here, but this law will not necessarily apply to it because you're be getting the coconuts from El Salvador. Then that will be a different law when it comes to exports from El Salvador. Now, if that is what you're looking into, that is another conversation that you can have with our legal team. Now, that's pretty much the international services law, the best general and yet kind of specific application of it. If you are hoping and looking at the possibility and wanting to investigate what that would look like to establish your business here in El Salvador, please head over to livinglikealocal.com and we can get you in. We'll schedule you in. We'll get you into the right meetings with the right government institutions. For example, with this last company, it only took 2 weeks. We got in with all the different governmental, it's like 4 different governmental institutions. We had to go in to find out all the red tape and bureaucracy and the certifications that we needed in order for them to come here. And within 2 weeks, they knew everything was green flags all ahead. And they were super excited. In fact, it caught them off guard. They're like, oh, wow, well, we've got to get our investors lined up. And that is the great thing about El Salvador right now. The attitude of the government is, let's make this happen. So it's all about cutting down the red tape. In fact, many of the people that we met with, they said, hey, if you hit any hiccups, if you hit anything that might not apply or might be sketchy, or if you need any help, just give us a call and we'll see what we can do. If this particular regulation would apply to your business, they are very proactive. They are very helpful. They're very much about breaking down the barriers in order to make a win-win for your company and for the country of El Salvador. And that's why it's amazing. And that's why I love living here and helping other people come to this amazing country. I am Jeni Ari, shining my light so you can shine yours. If you are looking into coming out to El Salvador, come to our website and our team will reach out to you and get you lined up and get you ready to go.